Hey, Jed. Welcome to the meeting.
All right, and I think we are up and running.
All right, well, welcome everybody to the North Valley, can we officially call it the North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council? Well, it will be that soon if it's not yet. And so we serve as the voice of the community with the county, and we're a county council, so we have to follow the Brown Act and all those kinds of things. And so we're here to serve the people of the North Valley, and also to give the county a way to communicate with us. So it's kind of a two-way thing. So I'd like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and Ariel will hoist the flag, I think. Yeah. All right, join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
For
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thanks, Ariel. And Vice Chair Doss, would you call a roll, please?
Yes, thank you. Arthur Dawson, Chair.
Here.
Kate Eagles, at large.
Here.
Vicki Hendren, at large.
Here.
Mark Newhauser, at large.
Here.
Matthew Dickey, Sonoma Valley SVCAC.
Present.
Angela Nardo Morgan, Glen Ellen Eldridge.
Here.
Melissa Dowling, at large, alternate.
Here.
Jed Cooper, Kenwood, alternate.
Here.
Damon Doss, Vice Chair, here. All present, sir.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Doss. So just a couple announcements. So we're turning off a question and answer for the chat. If you're a member of the public who'd like to speak at this meeting, when public comment is open, we'll let you know. Please use the raise hand function on Zoom, and we'll recognize you and give you a chance to speak. If it appears at any time during our meeting we've been hacked, we will immediately terminate and reschedule for a future date. And let's see, sorry. Please, this is for council members, please loop in Ariel on any communications you have as part of your ad hoc with county staff, rather than contacting county staff directly. We go through Ariel. And if you have any statements, questions, or event announcements, please put those in. This is for ad hoc committee folks. Please put those in your reports and not the future agenda items. And then a short update on the traffic concerns from the March meeting. Appreciated that TPW came and talked to us and heard our concerns, and they're already working on the downtown crosswalk. I was pleasant surprise to go out of my office, which is right out my door. I had to go around the Workman to get into my office, which was totally fine. So they just repainted it, made it into like a, whatever you call that, ladder style. They're going to reinstall a missing pedestrian warning sign. I think that's already been done, and add a crossing sign, crossing 450 feet ahead to the pedestrian warning signs, and convert the 3 crosswalks to ladder style. So that's just what they did. They also wanted us to know that Highway 12 at the Arnold Shoulder, that's a Caltrans issue. That was brought up because there was a near fatal accident there a few months ago. So we definitely would like to see that taken care of. And traffic and safety can work with Ariel to get more details. And then for the Arnold Morningside Mountain Madrone intersection, county crew evaluated the intersection and determined that the current configuration is the safest. If they remove the left turn onto Morningside, northbound Arnold, they would have to remove the left turn onto Madrone from southbound. The symmetrical alignment, 2 left turns, is the safest configuration for this intersection. They understand that it impacts traffic, but just ask people to have patience. And I won't pretend to be a traffic engineer, but I trust they know what they're doing. So, but appreciate that they got back to us on that. So now we're going to move on to the approval of the March 10th minutes. And let's see, I think, Mark, was there anything you wanted to say at this point, or should we go ahead with approval?
No,
Okay,
that's fine.
great. All right, so do I have a motion for the approval of the March minutes?
So moved.
All right, Vicky moves, and a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor of approving the March minutes, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
And anybody opposed? Say nay. All right, the March minutes are approved unanimously. And now we have a public comment. So if any members of the public out there would like to speak on items not on the agenda, if you want to speak on an agenda item, wait until that item comes up. Is there anyone who would like to speak?
I am seeing a couple hands right now.
Okay,
Do you want to set a time limit?
yeah. So let's set a limit of 2 minutes for public comments, and just to keep things moving, and we found that seems to work pretty well. And then just a reminder to the board to wait for all the public comment to finish before commenting on the public comments. And it's also fine not to respond. And I think we did this last time, just as a reminder for the ad hoc committee reports. We're going to keep those to 3 minutes as well, just to keep an eye on the time. And I'd like to shoot for a 2-hour meeting again. We did pretty well last time, and I thought that felt good to not feel exhausted at the end. And so we'll, if it looks like it's going long, I will check in, and we'll either take a short break or maybe move some items to next month. Okay, we're ready for a public comment.
Okay, first we have Terry Shore. Terry, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you very much. Good evening. This is Terry Shore. I'm advocacy director for Greenbelt Alliance. Oh, now everyone's disappeared and I just see a big 200. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the North Valley Municipal Advisory Committee. I thought that you would be interested to learn that Permit Sonoma has just released an environmental impact report on a significant change to housing and zoning in Sonoma County in the unincorporated areas, including Glen Ellen, Agua Caliente, and other areas around the county. It's a very large environmental document that would look at about 59 parcels with the potential of 3,000 or more units, medium to high density by right. And it's a very large environmental impact report. And I would just urge the MAC members, commissioners, to consider seeking a briefing on this by the County of Sonoma. Currently, there is only one public hearing scheduled at 1 o'clock in Santa Rosa on Thursday, May the 20th, which of course is probably going to be virtual. But this affects the unincorporated communities, including in Sonoma Valley, and it's a huge document. I haven't even begun to read it. The executive summary is 44 pages. So it's big because it is different from what's in the general plan. It's in advance of the update of the county's housing element. So because it's such a major change, and maybe we need the housing, maybe it's okay. I don't have quite an opinion yet, but I am concerned that the recommendations are to go inside the UGBs of cities where they were planning to grow and into, communities like Glen Ellen. So we need to really have a full public outreach, not just one public hearing. So it seems like the MAC would benefit from a briefing, considering it does affect Glen Ellen and the Valley. And as Supervisor Bourne knows, I'm also going to be asking it to be heard at the SVCAC and the Springs MAC so that the public gets an opportunity to understand what's going on and support it or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. And
Okay.
sounds like we have one other
Uh,
public
and
comment.
my timer on my computer, as you may have noticed, will not work. So I'm going to use my phone. So
Okay.
people won't be able to see it, but I'm watching. Okay. So next we have Teresa Murphy.
Hi, Teresa. Welcome to the MAC meeting.
You should be able to unmute, Teresa.
There we go. Thank you. Hello, Arthur. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Teresa?
Very good. Thank you. This is my first MAC meeting, and I'm very excited to be here. My name is Teresa Murphy, and I'm representing the Glen Ellen Historical Society this evening. The most recent article in the Sonoma County Press Democrat about the Sonoma County archive storage inspired me to inform the MAC that archive storage is a problem not unique to the county, but shared with at least one historical society, and that is in Glen Ellen. Recently, we removed our archives, electronically identified and recorded them, and returned them to a very small repository until a permanent temperature-controlled, fire-safe environment can be identified. These valuable items relate to the social, cultural, and natural history of the community, and like the Sonoma County archives, they need a permanent home. While the Historical Society is working toward establishing a museum and archive storage and library and visitor center on the campus of Sonoma Developmental Center, we also want you to know that we're planning, this plan includes the archives will allow for research in matters of health, ecology, and culture. We sent our proposal to Permit Sonoma, and we're waiting for an interview on May 3rd with Senator, I just promoted you, Susan Gorn, Supervisor.
No.
Supervisor. Because we were not formally included in the key informants report by Badia. So we're hoping that interview will be an addendum to that formal report of April 1st. So we want you or invite you to visit our website, glenellenhistoricalsociety.org, for more information. And we want to encourage your support in creating this center of learning that'll be serving as the heart of our community. This is an opportunity that cannot be missed.
All right. Thank you, Teresa. And yeah, I personally support the efforts of the Historical Society. And we have at least a couple of people here who've been active in the Historical Society. So one of our vital community organizations. Anyone else who would like to speak during public comment?
Yes, we have Alice Horowitz. And if anyone just joined, this is public comment on matters not on the agenda. And if you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand in Zoom. Alice, I am going to unmute you. You should be able to unmute now.
Yes, I am unmuted. Well, first of all, I just wanted to second what Terry Shore said. It does include the EIR. It includes a property at the corner of Arnold and Carquinez owned by Marty Winters. There's previously been a lot of discussion about that. So I encourage people to look into it more, and it really would be good to have some meetings about it, because the ERA is just hugely complicated and difficult to understand. But the real reason I wanted to speak is because as some of you on the Emergency Preparedness Ad Hoc Committee know, I'm pretty anxious about the state of vegetation management in the Cold Spring Fields meadow, the old Gemini meadow that's between Carmel Avenue and the regional park. So it's this 5-acre meadow that's right in downtown Glen Ellen. And every year the owner is pretty good about cutting the grass that's right along the easement through there. But there's just so much more that needs to be done there. And I have reached out to him. I made contact with him today and sent him the county ordinance that applies to those 5 1-acre lots. And also there's a retired fireman who lives on my street who pretty much saved Carmel Avenue during the 2017 fires. He has suggestions about it. I'm really hoping that he will respond positively and do some work. But if not, I'm prepared to push it further. So I'm wondering what are my avenues. Glen Ellen Fire Department, he lets them practice their maneuvers out there. I don't know how willing they would be to really push it. I'm wondering if there are any kind of county funds it will be a significant chunk of money for this guy to do what he really needs to do out there by removing dead trees and thinning brush. And of course, I know that there are environmental concerns with wildlife, and and where how do you square up the ordinances? And then
I'm sorry to interrupt, Alice, but that's your time.
so there you have it.
Thank you, Alice.
And next we have Deb McElroy Poole. So Deb, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, Deb. Welcome to the North Valley Mac.
Deb, it looks like you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you. And I'm still seeing you as unmuted, but we're not able to hear you. You might.
La, la, la.
Oh, there we go.
Great. All right. Are we in?
You're
I
on.
can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
welcome.
Great. Thank you. I understand that the MAC does not have development review authority, but the numerous projects being proposed and developed in Glen Ellen are creating impacts related to issues that the MAC does have authority, like traffic and safety, including emergency response and wildfire. Both the general plan and the Glen Ellen design guidelines acknowledge the need to protect the village of Glen Ellen, yet the county zoning and the permit regulations are not effective in implementing these provisions and don't factor in the cumulative impacts that are occurring in Glen Ellen from these projects. Individually, they may seem minor, but given the small village and the aggregate impacts are substantial. An example is the Sorkin piecemealing, the project that is resulting in a dense development in the middle of the village. The whole of the project was not reviewed. Recent addition to the project that was a surprise. That's in regards to the Railroad Street parking lot. The issues are property access on an unmaintained road, inadequate parking, heritage tree protection, neighborhood compatibility, adherence to the Glen Ellen design guidelines and the general plan. And then talking about the density also across the street, the Winters project being proposed, that will change from 4 residential units if it gets rezoned to 15 or 20 as part of the countywide housing rezoning project. Yes, the county needs housing, but this is just a proportionate amount of development given the village's small size and lack of adequate infrastructure and services, including roads. There's a need for a town meeting. I think others have mentioned this, with county leaders to discuss the future and how to mitigate these aggregate effects, including the SDC redevelopment, which are causing traffic and safety issues, as well as the demise of the local character and the quality of life. No one seems to be listening to our concerns that are valid and have been acknowledged in the general plan.
All right. Thank you, Deb. Yeah, well said.
Next, we have Tracy Salcido. Tracy, you should be able to unmute.
Hi,
Hey,
everybody.
Tracy, welcome.
Yeah, so this is my first MAC meeting, and I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. A lot of you I know well. And I just kind of want to, Deb said it really well. I think that when we started as a community to talk about how we get our voice heard at the county level, there were 2 elements to that. One was the Glen Ellen Forum, and the other one was a municipal advisory council that would give us an official voice with the county. We find ourselves now in a situation where, as Deb said, the most important thing that's happening in Glen Ellen our development proposals. And while I don't have, I mean, obviously I have strong feelings about SDC, and I have been following that very closely. I think it's really important that the county give this body or the Glen Ellen Forum a formal ability to talk about land use and what that means for everything that you guys are already talking about, traffic and quality of life. And, you know, it's just really important. So that's all I've got. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tracy.
All right, and I'm not seeing any other hands going once. All right.
All right, I'll open it up now to council member responses to public comments. Yeah, Councilmember Handren.
Yeah, in response to Terry's discussion about the environmental impact report coming up, I was wondering if she could share that or if we could get a link to that report, and I can share that on our Facebook page and try and get the word out about it.
Ariel can provide a link for all of you. It's on the right on the front of the Permit Sonoma website. Can't miss it.
I can find it then. Thank you.
Can I have a question about it? Would it be possible for someone to go into that document and pull out the pieces that particularly apply to Glen Ellen and possibly Kenwood? Because I think most people, myself included, will be daunted by a document with a 44-page executive summary. But I would love to get up to speed on it. And is that possible?
Arthur, you would not be daunted by that that weighty tome. I'm sure you could pick out pretty carefully, pretty fast, what is appropriate for discussion at Glen Ellen. So I would encourage you all to go on and look at it. I haven't started looking at it, but first of all, Terry, thank you so much for raising this as an issue. And thank you so much for all that you've been doing. I'm not sure everybody knows that at some point in the near future, you are no longer going to be representing Greenbelt Alliance, but you'll get to represent yourself as an individual, which may be more fun for you. So first of all, it's good to know that you've been advised about the availability of that. Her review is overarching over the entire county. Your review is just really looking at the specifics of Glen Ellen and Kenwood. I haven't, as I said, I haven't looked at it, but I think it should be pretty easy for you to review that.
Great. Any other council member comments?
A question for Ariel in regards to, I notice under participants, there's 25. Does that mean there are 13 people in the audience?
That's correct. There are 13 attendees and 12 panelists.
That's great. Thank you all for attending, even whether you speak up or not. It's good to have you here. Any other comments from council members on what was brought up? Yeah, Councilmember Dickey.
I have a question regarding the history of why the MAC was not allowed land use purview. Obviously, it's become an increasingly important aspect of our community participation based on not only tonight's comments, but others. And you know, we're sort of dancing around the gray areas, and I'm wondering what the history of that was.
The history of it, Matt, is that you, as a representative on the CAC, Sonoma Valley CAC, have the county authority vested in you to do land use authority. So therefore, the two municipal advisory councils do not have the land use authority and review. But you, as we've discussed before, you could potentially, you as individuals potentially could send a comment to or provide comments to the CAC about anything that they are reviewing. And you as a MAC could probably send a letter to the CAC about your concerns about anything that they are reviewing. Now, Ariel, I don't know that the CAC, Sonoma Valley CAC, is going to have a presentation of the housing rezoning and EIR, are they?
So they actually already had that presentation in December, and it was a good discussion. And the conditions that they heard it under was that there was going to be an EIR that was going to go to the Planning Commission. So a lot of times SVCAC will hear things without the EIR in, without all of the studies, and that does vary. But my understanding of that presentation was that this is a review that happens periodically. I don't remember if it was every 10 years or every 5 years. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the rezonings will happen or that projects will be built. It has to do with a state requirement that counties prove that they could build affordable housing so that the county doesn't get penalized by the state. Is my rudimentary understanding.
And this has been a topic of conversation in the Valley and elsewhere for 2 years. So it's taken, they've had scoping sessions, they've had suggestions from various community members about lots for consideration for increased zoning in Sonoma Valley, Glen Ellen, and elsewhere. And now they've really pared it down to figure out what was doable. And prepared the EIR to evaluate the impacts on it. Doesn't mean that each parcel will get increased in zoning. And it certainly doesn't mean that a development proposal for that specific parcel will be the dense development that it might be zoned for. Because any development has to incorporate parking within the development. And that means that there will probably be fewer units on the site because they have to have parking either in the structure or off-street parking somewhere in the development. It just means that it could be a higher density. It doesn't mean that it is the density that's being proposed for the site. Now, that being said, if in fact Glen Ellen has a concern about I have to say it's probably not a lot of development, but it's more development than Glen Ellen might see usually without this action happening. And so talk to me. I'll have a conversation with Permit Sonoma. Perhaps we'll host a community meeting and co-hosted by the Glen Ellen Forum so that Permit Sonoma staff can come in and talk about the various proposals and let you know where they are in the development application phase. So I think that's appropriate and we can accommodate this, and I'll have to have a conversation with Permit Sonoma about that.
Susan, do you recommend that would happen at a MAC meeting or as a separate special meeting?
As a separate meeting, because again, you don't have development review authority, but I would certainly want all of you to participate if you want to do that as individuals. And then if you wanted to send a letter as a MAC to the CAC or to Permit Sonoma about your overarching concerns about the amount of development, then you, of course, are free to do that. If you want to, as individuals, want to express some concerns about specific projects as they move through the process, you can certainly do that.
All right, thank you. Any other, Councilmember Newhouser?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going through my notes on each of the requests from the community, and I just thought that we should capture what it is we're being asked for specifically and what we can do in the future based on Terry's request for a briefing by the county. I think this is something we could potentially incorporate into a future MAC meeting to get a briefing on this tome. and what potentially the community can do to address any concerns. Regarding Teresa Murphy's request or presentation, it wasn't clear if there was a specific request, perhaps a temporary storage in the interim for some of their archive until a permanent home is found, and or express support to decision makers from the community for recognition of the Historical Society and their needs for representation. Regarding Alice's request, I can get back to her on a personal level, but I think that you're doing the correct thing and trying to talk to, there's a kind of at least a 3-step hierarchy in how to get compliance. And that is to do first the neighborly thing, to reach out, to ask for a landowner to address a fire hazard. If that doesn't work, try to get the local fire department to do a courtesy visit. We do neighborhood walkthroughs where anybody can join the fire department to walk through the neighborhood and identify issues that are of fire risk and where there's some preparedness or vegetation management needs to happen. And then, of course, then the final option is, of course, to contact the county for an enforcement action. So that's one way to address that. And then for Deb's comment, I thought what really stood out for me were 2 things. One is the relationship to the design, the Glen Ellen design guidelines, which my understanding has been adopted. It is part of the county. I don't know if it's rules and regulations, but it's been adopted. And I think it would be great if the MAC had a briefing by an authority on the guidelines or by someone local who knows them and can present them. And then it might behoove us to try to incorporate as much of those guidelines as they apply to the MAC into our respective ad hoc committees, goals and objectives and work plans. And then finally, well, and I think that covers most of the requests. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I have one question about, I like the idea of having the fire department do a walkthrough of, the Gemini neighborhood. One thing I've heard, from fire people is really, you need to start at your house and work out. So the most important place is like right next to the house. And so I'm wondering if the fire department could, if they did a walk through that neighborhood, they could identify, the most hazardous conditions, which might or might not be all on the Gemini property, and advise the neighborhood, what the best actions would be to take. I mean, I'm not a firefighter, I couldn't tell you, but I have heard that from a number of fire people that I know, that really it's best place to start is right at your house.
No, this is true, and we can go into more detail on this later, and when we talk about emergency preparedness. And usually the fire department walkthroughs really focuses on egress, which is the right of ways, and so there's safe egress not only for residents but also for the firefighters. But it is a possibility to get an appointment with a fire department for a courtesy visit to a specific landowner prior to, say, a formal inspection, which becomes then part of the regulatory process. Because if there's a concern and they aren't scheduled to do formal inspections, because they only happen about once every 3 years in any particular community, that if there are concerns, and those are shared concerns, especially if many properties abut the property in question, it's a good idea to try to address that in a neighborly fashion and involving the lowest authority possible in order to address that. And yes, I agree. Working from the house out, that the HIZ, the 100-foot defensible space, and most importantly, the 5 feet surrounding a home is the most critical. Yes, but when you have large fields and abutting properties, people get concerned. So it's a valid concern, and I think I've addressed how to go about that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I just, one last comment. I agree, Mark, it's a valid concern, and if there's a way to do a neighborhood evaluation, be interesting to see if the fire department would do that. We can talk more later.
Excellent.
All right, any other council member comments? Okay, I think we can move on to our Supervisor Gorin's update. So thank you for being with us, Supervisor Gorin. And
Thank you, Arthur. I was going to give a very brief report, chunk, and then the report maybe is expanded based upon the comments that you've all been talking about. Let me talk about, first of all, the number one issue today, not surprising to you, is the governor appeared in Lake Mendocino, dry lake bed, to declare a drought in certainly Northern California. This will undoubtedly trigger voluntary and mandatory conservation, whether you get your water from a municipal source through Sonoma Water or Valley of the Moon Water or groundwater. You're going to want to really look at what you can do, rip out those plants that don't really fit your needs, especially if you're looking at defensible space around your house. Minimize the amount of planting that you're doing now. Save your planting until the fall. And I know everybody wants to plant the garden, but plant it a little bit more sparingly than you might have in other years. This is year 2 of a drought. We could have year 3 or 4 of a drought, but this year, as we know, we've been enjoying the sunshine today and last couple of weeks. It's significant. Hopefully we'll do a little rain dance and get some water this weekend, but our reservoirs are significantly depleted, and we're going to be in for some hard times, but you know what? We've done this before and we can do it again. And so we will, which brings to topic number 2, talking about defensible space around the house. Prepare for more fires. I will bite my tongue. No one wants to see that. No one wants to see anybody losing homes, as Arthur and I will absolutely attest to. He's in his new home. I'm about a month or 2 away. God, it's taken me forever. But I will get in there, and I burst the bubble of my contractor saying, we're doing no planting around the house anytime soon. Wait until the fall. So yes, I'll get in there. Fire resistant materials all the way. But we don't want to lose any more houses. And I keep running into fire survivors from the Glass Fire, made the decision they can't rebuild, or really perplexed on what to do with 83 acres of burnt, scorched, dug fir trees. And so we're going to be working with the folks up on St. Helena Road for a very, very long time. But there are a number of initiatives moving through the county. Jay Jaspers from Sonoma Water just gave me a briefing and a future presentation on May 11th about the work that they have been doing on really looking at modeling what is the best way of moving forward in connection with the UC Cooperative Extension. We know that the RCD has grants proposal or grant available to folks, helping them understand about defensible space. What can they do to thin their forests or take care of the trees that are significantly scorched? So contact, I think they're working through Rebuild North Bay on that. And we know that the county is ready to pull the trigger on requests for proposals for vegetation, permanent vegetation management, not just cutting the grass, because this is like one-time funds from PG&E funds. So you're maybe a little late in starting a fire safe council. We've been working with the fire safe councils on queuing up some grant requests for projects that they have prioritized previously. But we may have more fires, and the need for this is going to still be with us for a while. So if you're thinking about creating a fire safe council in the Glen Ellen, Kenwood area, please do so. Figure out how to do that and then move forward. I'm getting a lot of email about the board review of the cannabis ordinance. It will be coming forward on May 18th. A lot of people who aren't necessarily anti-cannabis are saying, no, don't plant any more cannabis. We're in a drought. And whatever is approved now probably won't be planted for a long time. But the proposal, if you followed the issue in the Planning Commission, is that more of the permitting will occur ministerially through the Ag Commissioner, but the board has not had an opportunity to really weigh in. So the proposals coming forward from the Planning Commission may be pared back significantly or moderately. So don't get too upset about what you hear coming out of the Planning Commission. Let's see, I'm trying to figure out what else. And I would thank you, Mark. It was a good suggestion. Start, if you have a concern about vegetation, start with the property owners, but certainly do reach out to Steve Aker, because if this year is like last year, the county will be working with our fire departments on inspections. So you can issue complaints, send in complaints to the fire departments. They will do a walkthrough, send letters to the property owner. If it's not taken care of, they will levy fines. So you're absolutely right. Start with the neighbors and then work your way out. Tree preservation, talking about removing some trees for healthy forests, and yet we want to preserve the most important trees. And I'm increasingly concerned about the number of trees coming down through cultivation, either for cannabis or for vines. The tree preservation ordinance finally is coming forward. I've been arguing for this, advocating for this for now 6 years. We're going to have a workshop on May, I think it's 18th. There is information on the Permit Sonoma workshop about all of the work that they have been doing on the tree preservation ordinance, but please plan on participating in the tree preservation workshop. We had a little glitch yesterday in our board meeting where we were ready to approve representatives to the redistricting commission. I have 2 members, really from the Santa Rosa area, that I was ready to move forward and approve. Plus, we were going to recommend for district-wide or county-wide appointments. I've had no applications for redistricting from Sonoma Valley. And so I would encourage you, if you are interested in a truncated process looking at district boundaries for supervisors, please let me know and we can direct you to fill out the application. If you like number crunching and, oh, we're feeling generous, we're going to give you stipends. So that'll be an attraction for all of you. And in fact, we are looking at stipends for our advisory committees for all of our advisory committees, boards and commissions. And I know that Supervisor Hopkins pays stipends for the MAC members. Haven't even thought about that, but it does mean that there will be less funding for other projects. And so we'll talk about that in the future. Yesterday was a very, very in-depth discussion about housing and homelessness. And we subcontracted to a consultant, KPMG, to review the operations of the Community Development Commission, Homeless Services, Health Services, Housing, Human Services, to figure out the best way to produce affordable housing, deliver the services to our homeless community, and operate the housing authority. And if you want a bedtime reading that will put you to sleep, just go through the 150-page report. And if you have some suggestions on how we might consider this, boy, there's like 15 different areas with action items. But there are some interesting proposals and organization proposals, and I'm not exactly sure I'm in favor of a number of them, but to be determined. Let's see, vacation rentals are coming forward. I'm not sure when, but there will be a workshop, I think maybe in June or July, with an ordinance revisions later on in the year. There's a discussion coming up on the board. We gave $10 million from PG&E funding to the RED, Renewal Enterprise District, operated by Michelle Whitman, city and the county. The city also gave them $10 million to figure out what they're going to do with that money to help developers pencil out projects primarily in downtown Santa Rosa. And but it may have ramifications to the future of production of affordable housing throughout the county. So you might pay attention to that. I've asked that we have an ad hoc committee created with Chris Corsi and myself to talk about archives. I've been working with the library. They are finishing up an inventory at Los Gulicos. About 10% of the material there is part of the historical collections. And I put in a budget request to move that 10% of the archives to this central library, the annex. But that's 90% of the dusty tomes still at Los Gulicos, full of deeds and births and deaths and board minutes, the most beautiful calligraphy you've ever seen, and great big enormous volumes. I know we're concerned about the safety of Los Gulicos, but it's going to take us a while to figure out the appropriate place for archives, the appropriate ownership of the archives at Los Gulicos, and how we're going to find a new facility. Does it make more sense to provide fire resilience for that facility or move it somewhere else? How do we get public access to the archives? Those are pithy issues, and stay tuned on that one. I think that's the end of my report. Talked about drought, and we'll think about how we work together. Oh, what I was going to say, and Ariel can work with Arthur. It may be time to have a representative from Permit Sonoma come to do a presentation to the MAC. What we have been doing with the Springs MAC is that they give us a report on the status of a number of development projects moving forward. And Karina will give the report orally to the MAC. Sometimes I will give the report, but if it might be a way for you to track and follow the proposals moving through Glen Ellen. But I would start with a representative from Permit Sonoma at the MAC, where you can talk about why the housing rezoning was started, because there is a reason why. And you can talk about, in general, some of the development proposals moving through the MAC, and how to create a closer connection with Permit Sonoma so that your voice is heard. Like a lot of the departments, they have multifaceted topics that they deal with, including well and septic, fire marshal, code enforcement, permitting, of course, advanced planning, of course, and resource management. That's really what their old name was, dealing with aggregate and all of the things that got lumped into this department. So it may be good. Arthur, why don't you work with Ariel and maybe schedule a conversation with Permit Sonoma? Great people, absolutely fascinating. Brian O has been working with the planning advisory team for the SDC. And I would remember, and I just want to remark that thank you, Teresa, for being here. I'm arranging an opportunity for the Glen Ellen Historical Society to do a presentation with Diet and Bhatia and Brian O, so that the PAT is familiar with the proposal that Glen Ellen Forum Historical Society, or Glen Ellen Historical Society, is proposing for historical preservation on SDC. Whew. I think I covered it.
Thank you.
Any, thank you, Susan. Any questions or comments from council members? And then we'll take public comments after that.
I've put you all to sleep. I've stunned you.
But I have one question. You mentioned that you're going to invite Diet and Batya, if I'm saying it right, to meet with the Glen Ellen Historical Society. Would it be a possibility to have them give a presentation here at the MAC or meet with us or?
No, it's not appropriate because it really is just focused on the historical proposal developed by the Historical Society. And it's really just focused on that small area. I know that the PAT may be reviewing that as they might with the other proposals, but it really is premature to have a community meeting. They have not yet developed the alternatives. They're still slogging through the process. We are doing more outreach to reach out to those folks who perhaps were missed in the first part of the outreach. So it's premature to really have a larger conversation from their perspective.
Okay. Thanks. Any other comments or questions for Susan from council members? Yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
Thank you, Supervisor Gorin. Just to clarify, so I think you suggested Permit Sonoma might present to the MAC. And I'm a little unsure of the distinction between that and then we talked about having a community meeting separate from the MAC with perhaps the Glen Ellen Forum.
We could have it.
Yeah.
We could have it in a couple of different ways, but as I may have mentioned to the MAC members a number of months ago, it's very, very helpful to invite representatives from each department to make presentations to the MAC to discuss what it is that they do, all the various functions that they do. And then as a side note, they could talk about those couple of issues moving forward right now. It would not be an in-depth conversation. It would just help you understand the context of perhaps the overarching development as well as the site rezoning. I'll have to think about a community meeting. Would this take the place of a community meeting? I'm not sure.
Okay, but potentially they serve different purposes, I think,
right.
What you're saying, which I understand. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Councilmember Nardo Morgan.
Yeah, hi, Susan. Thank you for that. And I think it's really important to have Permit Sonoma come and talk to these concerns. But I'm wondering, and I don't know if it's appropriate, could the actual developers come and give, I know they've come before to the forum, but could they come to the MAC, Steve Sorkin and Marty Winter, and just talk about these developments? Because it's pretty clear from Tracy, Deb, and Alice that they're just really not being heard. Their voices are not being heard. And that, being a Glen Ellenite for over 30 years, that really grieves me that that's happening.
Well, let me just say, even if they did come to the MAC, how would you feel that your voices are being heard then? They've made the presentation in front of the forum. If you feel your voices are not being heard, why is that? What is it that you expect to have happen?
I think, let me just address that, because I think what Deb said, and I could be wrong, Deb, you can correct me, I don't know if she can come in and actually talk, but she said that this was done in a piecemeal fashion, that part of it was not really presented to the community. They weren't heard. They didn't hear about it. So maybe they could explain why this is now sort of a new feature is being presented with, I guess it's a garage and some more development on Railroad.
Well, this is the first that I've heard about the development proposals. You would think the supervisor would know, but no, I don't. A lot of this is handled in-house. Some of it is ministerial in process. And unless the community asks the question about a specific development, there is no reason for me to ask some questions and get some information. So let me ask some questions, get some information, and maybe suggest, discuss an approach from Permit Sonoma. Again, your role is not a development review authority, but it's appropriate that you know, excuse me, what might be happening in your community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gorin.
And just as importantly, ask Permit Sonoma what kind of outreach to them would get their attention. Is it individual letters? And I assure you, they do review individual letters. It's not that your voices are not heard. If the expectation is that you're just going to kill everything, that's probably not going to happen. If your expectation is, oh, the density is too tough, then that's probably illegitimate for discussion. If you have some concerns about how this particular part of a project might not work with a neighboring community, then those are the kind of things that really can be addressed through Permit Sonoma.
Great. Yeah, Councilmember Cooper. Okay.
My question has to do with process a little bit. If we want to become informed, I'm new at this stuff, so if we want to get a little knowledge about, in other words, is this forum the only place we can go to get informed about what's going on? Because I've tried and we can't call people privately, so we have to bring Permit Sonoma here in this forum, right? As I understand it, to get information and to dialogue information.
And that's why I say it's appropriate. The timing is appropriate to bring someone from Permit Sonoma to the MAC meeting to talk about overarching how you make your voices heard, how do you follow individual proposals that may be moving through the process. They have software that I haven't quite figured out yet, but Ariel has, so that you can actually track what is happening on a specific proposal.
But we can't have dialogue about it, correct? We have to wait for these meetings to have.
Well, obviously you can. You can ask a question, you can write an email. You may or may not get an answer, but the first part of it is getting information. What is it?
Understood.
What's being proposed? And then if you have real concerns, because neighbors outreach to them all the time about their concerns. A house being developed on Hill Road that seemed to be too tall. So, yeah.
Okay. But because we are a member of the MAC, we can we directly go to people in the county and have dialogue with them? That's kind of my question.
So Jed, I'll answer that because I know that was in Chair Dawson's intro. So that was more if you were doing it, if you were acting on behalf of your ad hoc and you're reaching out saying, I'm a part of the traffic and safety ad hoc of the North Valley MAC and I would like this information, you should just CC me on that. That's all I was asking for. If you as a citizen, if you as a citizen of Kenwood want to look up who the planner is on a specific project and email them, you are completely free to do that as an individual. It's more about if you're representing the MAC, because that's a part of the county.
So just don't identify ourselves as MAC members, right?
Sure, you can mention that you're on it, but you know, it's yes. But if you're doing something on behalf of the MAC to bring something back to the MAC that involves county staff, you should loop our office in.
Okay, thank you.
But if anyone has a particular question about a proposed development, please go to Ariel because our team is just great in sleuthing out what kind of development it is, getting information on it, talking with the planners, and then providing a link to that development proposal for you if in fact it actually has a completed application. Some of them may not yet.
Thanks, Susan. Any other, Councilmember Newhouser?
Yeah, a couple of questions came up. One has to do with the ministerial aspect of of many of these decisions, and in particular around development and permits. And I was wondering if you could speak to the fact that many of these people get surprised when they suddenly find out that plans are moving forward or have already been approved for a development that will substantially affect the quality of life of the neighbor. And especially in these unincorporated areas, particularly those that are outside of the review guidelines, fall prey to a lack of information and these kind of ugly surprises. And I think that if people were notified much earlier in the process, there would be less conflict, and there could be dialogue between the project proponent and the neighbors who will be subject to the decision, and maybe a compromise could be worked out. So that's one issue. And then the other had to do with what Deb Poole was talking about, which were cumulative impacts. And this is a very big issue. And having with a background in ecology, this is where the environment usually falls prey to the death by many cuts. And this is an issue I wonder if, and it'd be great to ask that question of Permit Sonoma. But I was wondering if these issues about the lack of transparency on ministerial decisions in development approvals and on cumulative impacts have come across your desk. Thank you.
You would think that everything comes across my desk, and no, it doesn't. Otherwise, I would have paper up to here or electrons up to there. No, often I find out from neighbors just like you that this has had a ministerial approval, and we only have 2 days to appeal it. So there is that process. I wish I could say we notify everybody of everything that we do, and we don't. Because we physically can't do that. We physically can't put every development proposal for a house or a building or a garage through the Board of Zoning Adjustments. They would be meeting every day for the entire day if that were to happen, and our staff would probably be tenfold. So some things, as a matter of fact, have to be handled ministerially. You should ask when Permit Sonoma comes in about the design guidelines. So if a development proposal happens in Glen Ellen, what are the design guidelines that are triggered in considering that development proposal? I think that would be a fascinating discussion. And then how do you get advance notice of something that might be happening in your neighborhood? Totally appropriate and a great discussion for Permit Sonoma. And I will be all ears because I will want to know exactly what they're saying, because often we want to know that something happening. For example, there was hair on fire proposal being developed at the top of Los Alamos Road with like, what was it, Ariel, 25 cabins, a great big enormous multi-use facility, events proposed, and I went, Los Alamos Road, what are they thinking? And Permit Sonoma said, just relax. It's not going to be approved. We're sending them, don't even think about it, kind of. So there is very much a difference between proposal, application, and approval. And so the hair on fire kind of, what are they proposing? That makes no sense when saner heads, contemplation planners get involved. And more often than not, well, I don't know more often than not, but they do say, no, absolutely no, and send them back to the drawing board. So that happens all too frequently. And private property rights, they can propose different things, and it may be appropriate under the zoning, but it may not be appropriate for what we're going through right now.
Thank you, Susan. So in the interest of moving on, we can take some more comments, but I just want to say it sounds like there's I'm getting a pretty strong feeling that a presentation by Permit Sonoma in the next few months would be really valuable to all of us. So let's remember that when we get to the future agenda. And if there's no further comments from council members, let's move to public comments.
Thank you all. I'll be here, but
you.
I'm gonna mute.
Okay.
Okay, so we have 5 folks right now. Do you have a time recommendation, Sheila?
Yeah, let's make it 2 minutes.
Okay. First, we have Teresa Murphy. Teresa, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify in my own mind, and did I understand that there was a comment made about zoning changes in the area? And if that is true, if the answer is yes, do zoning changes get have community public input? For example, if something's zoned a historic district or zoned for business and that's being changed, would people have an opportunity to make a comment on that? Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa.
And very quickly, yes, any zoning change has to go through the BZA and the board. So there are multiple opportunities for you to comment, and that's the point of the comprehensive EIR that's going to the BZA and then coming to the board at some point. So absolutely.
Okay, next we have Terry Shore. Terry, you should be able to unmute.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to put my hand up. Thank you. I'll put it down.
Okay, thanks. Next we have Alice Horowitz. Alice, you should be able to unmute.
Yeah, so just following on this last discussion, you know, Angela brought up that people feel like they're not being heard. And Susan, I certainly hear you when you say, like, of course, if you just want to kill a project, if you want to modify it, you know, those are really important qualifiers, not running off with your hair on fire. Mark, your concerns, Kate, Arthur, you know, you saying it sounds like we could really benefit from having Permit Sonoma come out and, you know, give us a meeting, a hearing. I think just because I live right in town, I talk to a lot of people, I'm a bit of a gadfly about town. And, you know, I'm just, people are really, they are worried about Glen Ellen. There's the SDC, there's these rezoning things, there's this sense that things are happening, they're piecemeal, they're out of control. And there is a lot of people feel like Glen Ellen is just being thrown under the bus. And I'm just gonna say that because that is a feeling that is out there, whether it's warranted or not. It's not a good feeling for the community to experience. And I do think it is something that we really need to address as a community, however we do it. And I don't have that answer. I don't know how we do it. But I do feel that there is a great level of anxiety in our town about the future of our town and our community as a community. And we need to do something about that. And I'm certainly here to help in whatever way I can. But yeah, lived here for 27 years, and I'm worried about the tenor of the conversations that I have with people just running into them in the market. So putting that out there, folks.
Thank you, Alice. Yeah, I think a lot of people share those concerns, and yeah, they're real. They're there.
All right, next we have Larry Davis. Larry, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, am I hearable?
You are.
Yes. Welcome, Larry.
I just want to be short. Thank you. All of this for me seems to be defensive, like we're in a perfect storm of potential disasters and real disasters, and we're trying to defend ourselves from all kinds of uncertainties. So what I suggest is, could we open up some space in the future to think about our learning? are designing the future we want instead of just trying to deal with a lot of futures that seem to be imposed on us without us having much to say about it. Because the things that are coming down right now have been in the works for years, and the things that are going to be coming down will still be coming down. And we don't have the competency and the power yet as a small village to defend ourselves effectively from these larger processes. So I really want to just put a pitch in and then shut up that we go back to learning and get ourselves competent, because we do have the competence in Glen Ellen, in the 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people that live here and love it, to actually defend and do the kind of future that the people of Glen Ellen want. But it's going to be slow, and it's going to take time and money and resources. And all of my bitching about it for years hasn't done much. So I'm really changing course and saying, okay, it's time to do some learning and then figure out how we can collectively make Glen Ellen into the future we want. It's designing for the future that we want. Anyway, and I'll shut up.
Thanks, Larry. I appreciate your being here. You're a constant presence, saying what a lot of people are thinking, I think. So thank you.
All right, and now we have Tracy Salcido. Tracy, you should be able to unmute.
Hi again. Thank you for listening. I would just reiterate, based on the conversation that has just taken place over the last, at least 44 minutes, that it's really important that we recognize that discussion of development and what that looks like, it needs to have a venue. It needs a formal place. And I would hope that either the forum or the MAC would be the place where we could have that kind of learning that Larry's talking about, and we could have that kind of open discussion, and that we would know that as well as individual comments, we would also have an aggregate comment that could come forward. Because I do think that carries weight. And I look at what happened with things where, co-signers come on letters, right? You get a letter from somebody like Sustainable Sonoma, and it's got a bunch of different people hanging on the end of it because they've all talked about it, and it carries more weight. And right now there is no place for Glen Ellen to go where we can put our name on a letter that carries more weight. And I would say the same thing for Kenwood, right? We're just kind of out there as individuals. That has power, I agree, but there's more power in the aggregate. So that's the point I would make.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, good point. All right, Ariel, anyone else?
I am not seeing any additional hands.
Okay, then I think we can move on to our bylaw update, which will be Ariel's gonna lead this. So we're just talking about the name change and the alternate geographical representations and term limits. But I think you've got a short presentation about all that. Is that right, Ariel?
I do. So I will turn on my video, but I'm leaving my video off because it seems to make my my signal better. It seems to make this whole thing flow better. So I will turn it on for now, but if you see me pop off, that's why. So it's just a really, really brief presentation. It's pretty spelled out in the agenda what the 3 items are, but I just made a PowerPoint to kind of, summarize it and to actually show you what it looks like in the different versions, the old version and the new version. It's all pretty simple. So first is the name change, which we already approved. Second, and both of these were things that I noticed, but I noticed after the MAC began meeting. And so we could revise the bylaws all we wanted before the MAC actually, formed officially, but it needs to go through you because it's your body, right? It's your council. So we approved the name change. Second, we want to change the language that would allow the alternates to fulfill the geographical requirement. There's some geographical requirements spelled out, and it had the alternates as needing to be at large. So that'll make more sense when I show you the language comparison. And third, it's just a term limit revision. So it will allow Supervisor Gorin, who appoints the MAC members, to appoint people for additional terms if appropriate, right? It just kind of adds a little more freedom, and that's how the SVCAC bylaws were written. And so I just copied that exactly. The language is exactly from the SVCAC one. So first, the name, that's really clear. We all understand the name. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. So on the left side, you have, the former bylaws, and then we have the red strike through. This is a document I have to prepare to get this through the Board of Supervisors. So you can see it's just every time it said North Valley, it says North Sonoma Valley now. This one, this captures the other two elements. So, on the left is the original language, on the right is the new language. So down here, you see the prior, it says 2 representatives from Kenwood, 2 from Glen Ellen Eldridge, 1 from SVCAC, and then at large, 2 representatives and 2 alternates. So we're changing that language to say, the first paragraph's the same. Only the red is the edit. So 2 alternates will also be appointed, just to make that clear. And then the North Sonoma Valley MAC will have the following. So 2, 2, 1, and then 4 at large. So that's just because honestly, we didn't get very many applications from Kenwood, and the 2 applicants we got are on the MAC. Jed and or alternate Cooper and Vice Chair Doss. So we just wanted to make sure that would all comport with the bylaws in the future if we run into that kind of an issue. Second, the term, you still have a maximum of 4-year terms. And so we're changing it to say that, the beginning is the same. But that no member or alternate member shall serve more than 2 terms unless their appointing authority approves an exception to allow the commissioner or alternate to serve an additional term or terms. It's all pretty basic. The alternate geographical, that was something I actually thought I had changed before we actually formed the MAC, but I made a mistake and I didn't. So when we're changing the name, it was a good opportunity to just get all this stuff through. And that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Ariel. And so just a note, this isn't the time to rewrite the bylaws beyond, this was in the agenda, so this we can discuss, but if there's something else people see, we'd have to do that at a future meeting. Any questions or comments on Ariel's presentation or on the changes to the bylaws? Any public comments on the changes to the bylaws?
I am not seeing, it's not an exciting item, I guess.
That's good. We'll move right through. Okay, so do I have a motion to accept the updates to the bylaws as presented? Somebody move. So Vice Chair Doss moves, and do I have a second?
I second it.
All right, all in favor of making the changes to the bylaws, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
And anyone opposed? All right, we passed the update with unanimous vote. And now we're going to move on to our presentation from the Preparedness Ad Hoc Committee. And just a reminder, we're about an hour and 20 minutes in, so we're shooting for around 2 hours. Let's see how it goes, and I'll we'll see how long this takes, and then we might cut back a little bit on the reports, maybe cut those down to 2 minutes. But let's see where we're at after this presentation. And we can always take a little break too. All right, Councilmember Newhouser, take it away.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And do you want me to try to keep it at a certain length?
You know, if you could keep it around probably a half an hour, that would be good.
Oh, let's do better than that.
Okay, how about 20 minutes?
Well,
shoot for
yeah,
20
okay.
and
No, that sounds good. I think what I'm going to do is, well, first I'll give a little intro and then I'll share my screen so that we can show you the current report. And actually, why don't I just go ahead and do that now? Can everybody see that?
Mhm.
You can? Okay. So just a brief explanation. I was planning on just going through the work plan that was distributed earlier and realized that that would be probably pretty painful. So, but as with any work plan, it is just that. It's a plan to use as a tool. And we all know that what actually happens is not necessarily what was written in the plan. And it had been a couple of months now. It was in February when I wrote that, and with the input from our team members on the ad hoc. And so anyway, but what remains true are the 6 objectives. So our overall goal is to just enhance community emergency preparedness and response. We included response because, as I'll explain later, but you know, it's not just the preparedness, preparing for an emergency, but it's how you respond, such as evacuations. And you know, when there is an emergency. So the objectives was basically about us learning about what is going on in the community, to identify what needs there are in the community for preparedness. And then the idea is to come up with solutions through a collaborative process of working with community members, existing groups that have formed since the fires in 2017, reaching out to community consultants, county staff, and other program, emergency preparedness program proponents throughout the county. And then to develop our own plans for the community. And then the ongoing support for implementing these identified solutions. And then in the process, facilitating partnerships and then supporting ongoing outreach and education. And I wanted to emphasize the importance of our role of being this two-way communication conduit of information between the county and the community. So, so rather than go through all of the step-by-step objectives, actions in each objective, and our deliverables, our projected deliverables, I thought I'd just go ahead and present what we actually did within that. So the first thing we did was we identified what has been going on. And I think most of us know, but I'll just go through it quickly and highlight those things. The progress, the emergency preparedness, as we know, has been, the major focus has been county vegetation management, enforcement through their inspections and enforcement through their ordinance. And this is where most of us have felt the impacts and got the initial awareness. There's lots of literature that's been distributed, both from the county, CAL FIRE, Fire Safe Sonoma, other fire districts. And we also discovered that there's a lot of really good programs out there, like SCOPE and the Halter that's been run by our local Julie Atwood, Fire Safe Sonoma. Ready Glen Ellen was one of the initial efforts by the Glen Ellen Forum. of getting information out and helping neighborhood groups to organize and do emergency preparedness. Then we reached out and finding other experts in the community like Nancy Brown with Sonoma County Emergency, and then private consultants like Stuart Mitchell, who's done a lot of presentations for like Oakmont and others. And so there's this whole industry and governmental agency support that has risen up out of these fires and need for preparedness. And then we realized that the neighborhood community efforts were really intriguing, and there's a lot of activity in Oakmont for neighborhood groups, and Springs MAC actually has initiated a Map Your Neighborhood outreach program whereby they're working with trying to establish neighborhood leaders and groups to work together in preparedness. Local efforts like the Glen Ellyn Forum and their community preparedness committee was very active early 2018 up until more recently, less active now, but still have a lot of really good outreach materials and the archive of their past progress on their website. And that's a really great source of information. And then the several groups, neighborhood groups that have formed since 2017, they're still active. There's not a lot of them. I mean, we've reached out to them and interviewed them and found out what's working, what's not working. And so that's been a great source of information. And I think a really great model for future neighborhood group development and outreach. So the needs that we identified, and a lot of this was just from internally what we saw and what we've learned from neighbors in the communities of both Glen Ellyn and Kenwood, is the need for better evacuation planning. I think a lot of us know that that's been a huge issue, especially with Oakmont. So we know that this is an issue. It needs better direction, more route options, or maybe just the awareness that we need to get out early, right? Since there's just a lot of single avenues of escape. But other things that came up early, I know Matt was really strong in advocating for more comprehensive emergency planning, and because it's not just wildfire we need to prepare for, you know, it's earthquakes and flooding. These are both very real and very high probability disasters that could happen and that we should be preparing for. You know, there's been a lot of emphasis on vegetation management. And this is, you know, it's kind of a singular focus. It's the only ordinance we have that actually has enforceable actions. There's been a lot of money for doing vegetation management, but there hasn't been really as much emphasis on structural hardening. And at least from what I've learned and from presentations I've seen from scientists and experts is that this can be the greatest vulnerability for homeowners is the lack of fire resistance of our homes. So this is something that is a need, you could say, because it doesn't have as much funding, it doesn't have enforcement, and so it needs more awareness and a more effort to increase awareness of this issue. So and then effective outreach and education. We're learning that the hardest thing is, you know, there can be a preponderance of educational materials out there, but it's getting people to not only to read them, but to act on them. And the neighborhood group process whereby people organize and create a kind of a peer group that will help each other in the learning and in the implementation has been proven to be an effective model for increasing public safety, not just for individual homes, but for the community at large. And so what we've kind of boiled this down to is under the aegis of collaborative solutions, is to pursue kind of a community network of neighborhood groups throughout this MAC territory, if you will, and to focus on, emergency preparedness to achieve wide-reaching emergency preparedness throughout the community. And the two programs that tend to jump out is the Map Your Neighborhood program, MYN, that came out of Seattle and has been adopted throughout the United States, and has become more popular in recent years in California and in Sonoma County, as well as SCOPE. I'm trying to remember now, it's I can't even think of what the acronym is right now, so bear with me, but it was formed in northern Sonoma County, and it was very similar in that they create these neighborhood groups to organize, working with their fire professionals to prepare for emergencies. SCOPE is probably a little bit stronger on wildfire, but Map Your Neighborhood is a little bit more accessible and easier to do, and very comprehensive. And then community-wide participation is what we are learning is that it can address the issues that are really needed, and what all of the issues that we identified as being a problem in our particular community. And that is that if you can get people to form a phone tree to help each other, to warn each other, to help people get out, we can ensure timely evacuations. Also, just having better information out there on all of these different types of emergencies, we can achieve comprehensive emergency planning. And then, sharing information, to homeowners talk to each other, they can help each other to discover ways in which they can make home improvements, even help each other. And then, it's just learning that if you work collectively, you're not just saving your own home, it's really about creating a safer community. So the process requires identifying and recruiting neighborhood leaders. And this is probably, one of the more challenging parts, is really finding someone who is devoted and energetic enough to want to reach out and bring their neighbors in to participate. And the hope is that once we've developed an outreach program and start bringing people on board, then we can form a leadership council made up of successful leaders, including some of the folks that I've talked to that have, they're in these existing neighborhood groups, have said that they were willing to help with new leaders and with sharing information on what works and what doesn't, so that we can help sustain this effort of not just growing the program, but making it basically self-sustaining over the long haul. And in the meantime, we felt like it was important to identify funding to help pay for a coordinator to get to a critical level of participation. And from what I've learned in talking to professionals in this realm, that it's likely to take 3 years before we can kind of reach that level of participation that it maintains a kind of a self-sustaining momentum. And I just covered the first 3 objectives, and the last 4 are really kind of next steps. And it really has to do with the support for the implementation. And so internally, what the ad hoc committee members have decided to do is to initiate some pilot projects. I'm not identifying them specifically because we wanted to leave out any area of any geographic and specific mentions, but both Damon Doss and myself have agreed to do this work in our own neighborhoods to learn more about it, kind of practice what we preach, so to speak, and actually make a go of it so that we can learn not only the intricacies of doing this work, but to show by example what can be done. We are in the process of identifying nonprofits. I'm talking to both the Glen Ellen Forum and Sonoma Ecology Center about potentially getting some funding and how we can work out an arrangement for having a lead agency to kind of house or adopt this outreach program, because as we know now, the MAC cannot secure grants for ourselves. We can help other people, we can pass on resources and funding, but we can't take in outside money. And it makes more sense to have this led by a local nonprofit that represents the community. So we want to help get that going. The MAC itself can continue to share information, resources, contacts, help find the funding for the nonprofit, even help find an appropriate candidate if needed, and to lead the project, and then to continue in an advisory role and perhaps serve on the leadership council for the program. And then the next step is it's basically the 5 and 6 objectives are basically ongoing elements that we would continue to serve in helping to facilitate partnerships, helping to form and maintain the leadership council, and then continuing to support outreach and education, and basically back to that conduit, that two-way conduit of information between the county and the community. And that's it. I don't know if Matt or Damon, you want to add anything, but if you have any questions, love to hear it. This document has been sent to Ariel, and so it will be accessible. And yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Just to comment, if I could, Arthur. First of all, I'd like to thank Mark for his tremendous amount of work and effort in putting together the report. And Matthew and Mark and I, and in our last meeting, Larry Davis actually joined us, have spent many hours just talking about and learning, because I don't think when we started the process, we understood exactly how many organizations there already were and how much development had already gone on. So it's been very helpful to learn all of that. And we've interviewed the folks from Sebastopol. And in fact, coming up next week, I think it is, wait a minute, maybe it's even on Thursday, there's an Oakmont doing a program on Map Your Neighborhood. But I think that we're looking at what works and what can work and what's realistic and what will people do in our community. We were all very influenced by a powerful presentation by Nancy Brown, and I forget who the gentleman was, who the consultant was, that did a presentation several weeks ago from the county, just about the hesitancy for people to get ready, the hesitancy to actually do something, even though when they know it's coming. I do serve on the local fire district board in Kenwood, and every meeting we talk about what's coming because we know it's coming again, especially the potential for this summer. So we're looking forward to it. We recognize it's not an easy answer or a quick answer. And I just want to express my appreciation for Mark's organizing it so well. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Vice Chair Dawson, I second that. Yeah, really impressive amount of work, Mark and everyone on the committee. And yeah, there's a lot to be done and a lot to learn, and you guys have really jumped in.
Yeah, the hard part is now to implement all this. So, hope it's not too pie in the sky here, but fortunately there's good programs out there and we don't have to really reinvent the wheel. So hopefully, now it's about working with the community. try to figure out how to get it going. So, but thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments or questions from council members? Yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
Just quick question. Great work, guys. Thank you. Have you kind of defined what success would look like? I was thinking, wow, is it that people, as Councilmember Doss said, people actually acknowledge they have to do something, or is it everyone being part of a neighborhood group? We don't have to answer this right now, but I'm kind of curious, have you kind of figured out what would success look like in this instance? And maybe you covered it, but I didn't quite hear it phrased or
I think that
contextualized
first
that
of all,
way.
as we define the neighborhood group, then in Kenwood, we're going to try a map your neighborhood approach. And once we identify that, we've identified the number of homes, the number of participants, the level of participation, and does natural community leadership evolve, or is it something that we have to do another way?
Yeah.
And so for me, Biggs Marcus defined that it may take several years to actually have a ongoing group in the Kenwood area. For me, if we have leadership step up, if people are willing to take and do the surveys of Map Your Neighborhood, that would be the beginnings of. But it's probably going to take several years before we can say we have a Map Your Neighborhood project in Kenwood. For me, success would be if more than one Map Your Neighborhood in Kenwood evolved, so that you had, let's say, a street with 25 homes, and down the block or two, there's another street with another 25 homes, and they formed one. That would be successful. Right now, we're just trying to see if people even want to come to a meeting.
Got it. Okay.
You know, Kate, you asked a really good question, and it's a humbling process, because now we're talking about you know, kind of a socio psychological, you know, shift in the way people think, and it's kind of going back to, you know, tribalism in a way to get people to communicate and participate and work together. But it has a lot of ancillary benefits, and this is something I know that Larry Davis is very keen on, and it's near and dear to his heart to have community come back together again and be close and in good communication. But when you try to put a quantity on what is success, and this is something that we have to do in any grant proposal, they want to know what measurable outcomes there are, right? And the Oakmont presentation discussion that they had, it was revealed that they had 11% participation, and they were kind of embarrassed about that. And one of the consultants says, "What are you kidding? That's great. That's success." You know, so I think that initially, yes, we would be very modest in our expectations. And if we can achieve 11% by year 1.5, and you know, maybe 25% by year 3, that would be phenomenal success. And that would mean not just people signing up and filling out surveys, but actually implementing those preparedness actions that actually improve their individual and kind of neighborhood-wide, you know, safety. So anyway.
All right, thanks. And Supervisor Gorin?
Great, thank you, Mark. And I think the name you were looking for is the CERT program, the communities organized and prepare for emergencies is the COPE program, but the CERT program actually is very full-fledged in Marin County, more for rural areas. So a lot of the areas in the northern part of Sonoma County are organizing around either the COPE or the CERT program. But I would just say, from my perspective, now living in Oakmont, it really depends on, we have a lot of sub-associations, so it's easier to break up the enormous Oakmont. And it works very well. And both of the sub-associations that I've been involved in And during the night of the fires, we had someone come up to our house and make sure that everybody was evacuated. During the glass fire, we had someone go to all of the folks in our Overlook Drive area to make sure that people were notified and evacuated. And so but it also is reassuring because we organize, get everybody's email addresses, phone numbers, and we know actually who lives in the neighborhood. So it's a great way indeed to get to know your neighborhood. But also there are drills, monthly drills or every other month drills where they say, okay, we're going to have a drill, and the leaders get out there and with their walkie-talkies. And the challenge in Oakmont, which is a challenge everywhere, of course, is that we have a lot of older folks and they can't participate. And we're constantly looking for, oh, someone young moved into the neighborhood. We're going to grab them for the COPE program. So it's the churning of the responsibilities that is so important. So it's a great report, a great way forward, and it has many, many benefits. And it's just a question of, can you make it small enough so that people say, I could do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Supervisor Gorin. Well, I have a little question that's a little bit bigger than just this, but I wanted to check in with Ariel. We have our chunk of funding, which some of it's going for transcriptions and staff time, but there is some money that can be allocated, if we vote for it. And I'm not clear if there's a deadline at the end of June. If we don't spend it, then it's gone.
So it is 10,000 per fiscal year, and then you will have another 10,000 next fiscal year. I know the Map Your Neighborhood program, the Springs MAC, actually, that money can be spent on the materials. So if the ad hoc gets to the point, we did that for the Springs MAC, and we'd be willing to do that, I'm sure, for this MAC as well. There's like brochures that come with the Map Your Neighborhood program. So that's certainly a good use of those funds. But yes, it doesn't roll over. So if you say you have, $7,000 left at the turnover of the fiscal year, you're not going to have 17,000 next year. But that's how that works.
Okay, so I would just personally recommend to the preparedness ad hoc to, if there's, sound like there's some funding you could use, and we've only got a couple months left in this year. So, I encourage all the ad hocs to do this, but it seems like emergency preparedness may have the greatest need of funds at this moment, to go ahead and fill out one of the forms that Ariel sent a while back about a request for funding through the MAC, and then I think, does it just get submitted and then we vote on it? Is that basically how it works?
Yeah, so I would want that form, let's see, 2 weeks before, preferably 2 weeks before the next meeting, so that I can send it out with the materials. We would want it agendized, right? Because the chair does need to sign it, and the MAC as a whole does need to approve it. I can always, since we're coming up on the end of the fiscal year, I can always, once I get it, I can make sure it's okay with Supervisor Gorin, because Supervisor Gorin also needs to sign it. We could get that done a little bit before it comes to the MAC, since we're coming up on a deadline.
Okay, well, I strongly encourage you to go ahead and fill that form out for what you think you could use.
Well, if I may say something, I appreciate that, and we will certainly do that. But as we discussed offline, Arthur, I think that we're not going to make any assumptions about utilizing all those funds. So if there are needs from other ad hoc committees, I think it's important to have those funds available for their use, and because I know that there's outreach needs, there's who knows. So I don't think we would necessarily need all 7K for just educational materials, but I'll certainly think about what we should be getting at this point in time. I feel it's so yeah, no, it's a great opportunity. I just want to make sure it's shared equitably.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. But I think, I mean, the way I see this could work is just if other ad hocs want to, what's the word? Ask for funds, that we just do this. We do it all. Maybe if we can do it all at the same time, then we can just look at all the proposals. If maybe there's less than 7,000, it all gets approved. If we have to hash out, maybe we fund 80% and that comes to 7,000. But I'd encourage the ad hocs to go ahead and do that probably for next month's meeting. I don't know if this isn't on the agenda, so I don't know if we should.
Basically 2 weeks from now, right?
Yeah. So think about what you could use, and can funds like that go, like if the preparedness committee wanted to say pay for some hours by a coordinator at the ecology center to start setting this up, is that acceptable use of funds, or would that be off limits?
That's, it's pretty complicated, but no, it can't really pay for things like that. It's more one-time uses, things like we did use it for the brochures these funds haven't been used very often by either MAC because the Springs MAC has a number of other expenses that it mostly gets eaten up by the administrative. But they did use it for, I think it was $200 to $300 to get the brochures for Map Your Neighborhood in English and Spanish. You could also use them for, printing I don't know. I mean, there haven't been that many, but things like staff time, things like hiring people, those aren't things that you can do. It's more of a something practical, something physical, something,
Okay.
I mean, possibly for if there was a project, right? If you wanted to do we don't have any ad hocs like that, but if you wanted to buy plants for a project that was approved that you're all working on, supplies to do a creek cleanup, things like that. That's more what it's intended for, but we'll cross all those hypotheticals when we come to them. But staff time is not that's not what it's intended for.
Okay, well, thanks. So now I think we have a pretty good idea what we can, sort of where we can dream a little bit on using some of those funds. Yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
But presumably we need to understand the cost. We can't just say, oh, we're going to take 5,000 for some sort of brochure printing. So this is going to happen pretty quickly. We have to have a sense of what that cost would be, right? Either for the May meeting or for the June meeting, because that's it for our first 10,000 is what I'm thinking. Okay.
So it's not dissimilar. I manage the community investment funds and the tourism impact funds for Fraser-Gorin as well. So it's not dissimilar from that. We would want to see either like an estimate. You'd want to see for the brochures for the Springs MAC, they priced it out of what it was. So no, you don't get to just make it up. You need some kind of supporting documentation.
Budget.
Right. Thanks. Yeah, Councilmember Dickey.
Process question for you, Ariel. Do we have a bookkeeping requirement for the expenses associated with transcription and staff time? So does that come to us and we have to approve that, or is that done administratively?
So that's done by me. I track it. If you wanted to see, your expenses so far, I'm happy to bring that. I can bring it. I can provide it to the chair, and he could share it in his welcome remarks, or we can put it on the agenda. You don't have any statutory requirement to do that. I can also just kind of share the amount that has been spent so far with you at any time.
No, I was just curious, I was confirming for ourselves what the protocol is. That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, Councilmember Narda Morgan.
Yeah, Ariel, you might have answered this, and I'm sorry if you did and I missed it, but I'm wondering if the funds are not appropriated or used for that year for the MAC, does it then roll over to the following year, or are they just not available then?
They do not roll over.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? And then we'll go to public comments. Okay, let's open it up to public comments and questions.
And I see someone on the phone. If you're on the phone and you would like to make a comment, you can hit *9 to raise your hand. I am not seeing anyone raise their hands. So I think we're good.
All right, thanks everyone. So we're coming up on 2 hours. I feel like we can, well, how do people feel? Any comments on what if we try to keep the reports down to about 2 minutes, and then the only thing after that is consideration of items for future agenda. I think we probably can wrap this up in the next 15 or 20 at the most. Anybody object to continuing on with that plan? Okay, good. So let's go to reports and announcements from council members and ad hocs. First one is the CAC. Council member Dickey.
Brief comment before I go on to agenda items that were discussed at CAC. I just would like us to acknowledge Dick Fogg and his long service to our Sonoma Valley community on both the SVCAC and the Planning Commission. He was a longtime resident of the Valley. He passed away, and he was a really good guy. And he put his heart and soul into our community for land use planning. So I feel, we're at the MAC. I feel like it's important to acknowledge such things. And again, before I go on to the agenda items from the CAC, I just want to remind everybody that I am the MAC liaison to the CAC. And after tonight's discussion regarding land use, and I just want us to take advantage of the fact that we have the potential for advocacy with the CAC. We would do that collectively. I think that's always the best approach. But I did inquire today about the project on Arnold Drive and its expansion. We examined that project last year or 2 years ago in 019 and approved it without these expansions. And so I did inquire about it today as, I guess as a private citizen, but also because I'm on the SVCAC and I'm on the MAC. I just want to remind everybody that we do have the potential for advocacy for our community at the MAC or at the CAC, and let's take advantage of it. In terms of stuff that came up with the CAC, we received a review from the sanitation district about not only emergency preparedness, but also their projections for what would happen, for instance, with SDC being included into the sanitation district requirements. And I won't go into details, but it was very informative. I think we can be rest assured that we are not going to be compromised at as SDC is expanded into multiple housing units. There is capacity at the sanitation district to manage everything. And as for emergency preparedness, again, I came away from the meeting very assured as to what they're doing. They've applied for grants to further expand their preparedness. And I'll just leave it at that for brevity purposes. The other thing that we did was we reviewed another cannabis project. And I thought it was an interesting, based on our discussion from Supervisor Gorin today about water use, because this project is on 5 acres on the south end of the Sonoma Valley. and their projection for their annual use from both the county and their internal projections for this project were 1 million gallons of water annually. And, you know, I asked the question as to whether or not they were going to be required to make use of advanced water use technology to reduce their water use. And is not a requirement for these types of projects. And, you know, given what we heard today from Supervisor Gorin and what's likely to be happening in terms of water restrictions, I wonder whether or not that should be a requirement for these kinds of projects, that they are required to manage their water more efficiently, and provide the sort of background technology that will reduce their water use. So in any event, that's the end of my comments, and I'll turn it back to you, Arthur.
All right, thanks, Councilmember Dickey. And now report on the Glen Ellen Forum from Melissa Dowling. Councilmember Dowling.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to read a little bit from my notes just to hopefully make things go quickly. We had our annual board elections in the last board meeting, which was last Thursday. So I'm no longer president of the Glen Ellen Forum after about almost 3 years. Amanda Schoen is going to be president. She's been secretary for the last year. I'm going to move into the VP position to support Amanda. Katie Everidge is new to the board and she's going to be secretary. Dave Shefferman is going to remain on the board as treasurer. We have 3 new directors, Pat Carlin, Bean Anderson, and Alice Horowitz. We have 4 returning directors, Bettina Sichel, Debbie Lammers, Nancy Padian, and Rob Schurmeister. And then 2 of our board members have completed their terms and they are retiring from the board with our gratitude, Tracy Salcido and Angela Morgan. They were both original board members of the Glen Ellen Forum from when the forum first became a nonprofit. So they've seen it all and really been instrumental in making the GE Forum what it is today and really getting it off the ground. There are several projects, a handful of projects. Councilmember Newhouser is working with the Glen Ellen Forum Projects Committee on 2 projects. What he's named, or they've named, the Firehouse Triangle, which is what I always called the little triangle of land across from the fire department that needed to be refurbished. So I guess the Firehouse Triangle is a much snappier name. Thank you for that. And then also on the Jim Birkeland Bridge holiday lighting for 2021, which is going to have a very long lead time. So the Glen Ellen Forum Projects Committee and Mark Newhouser are working together on those. Our speakers at the April meeting it was all about Sonoma Mountain, and we had 3 academics, lovers of Sonoma Mountain, experts from various organizations who really gave a great educational presentation about Sonoma Mountain, and those recordings are all available on the Glen Ellen Forum site, which interestingly was hacked recently. So our website for the Glen Ellen Forum was down for several days hacked by the probably least intelligent hackers in the hacker community, because I have no idea what the end game is for hacking the Glen Ellen Forum website. It just, there's not really any value in that. And that is it for the Glen Ellen Forum.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Dowling. And if you want to just roll right into the report for the communications ad hoc.
Absolutely. Our Facebook page, which I really have a lot of, I'm excited about the Facebook page growing and becoming a great channel of communication for the community, not just on MAC activities, but also on just general news that is interesting to the community. And I see the EIR report that came out from the county as one of them. It'll be a great way for people to have information that's relevant to them, that is going to be more at their fingertips for those who are on social media. So there are now 38 followers of the North Valley MAC, or North Sonoma Valley MAC Facebook page. And I'd encourage everyone who is a follower on the Facebook page, if you're not, please go in and follow it. And there's a very easy way to invite followers when you log into the page. And I just went down my list of Facebook friends and tagged everybody who lives in Glen Ellen or Kenwood to follow the page, and that resulted in quite a few new people. So I think we can really expand that way, and the more followers we have, then the more effective the page will be. And thank you, Vicki, for getting that started. Also on a budget concept that we can maybe talk about exploring, there is a way within the Facebook page to pay $20, $30 to boost the page, which could then put it at the top of people's news feeds, potentially send a Facebook ad out to everyone who is in Glen Ellen and Kenwood, inviting them to follow the page. When you see, something you might be interested in, that could be something that we could explore. And I'm sure it would be less than $100 to make that happen, and could be a good way to get some more traction there. We're continuing to reach out to the organizations that we've listed as targets for us to interact with and collaborate with within the MAC. So including from this last month, Valley of the Moon Alliance, Arthur reached out to them and joined one of their meetings, telling them about the North Valley MAC, encouraging them to participate. And then also the Sonoma Ecology Center, he's made contact with them. We set up a set of Google Sheets that we're going to use to collaborate, to track our progress on organizations that we're targeting and who we've contacted, and also to keep track of future projects for our outreach committee. And that is all.
Thank you, Councilmember Dowling. And let's see. I have the preparedness ad hoc up next. Is there anything that you guys want to add to what's already been said? We got a pretty good dose of what you're doing, but
no thanks. We're
but
done.
happy to hear a little more if you got anything else you want to add. Okay, let's move on to traffic and safety ad hoc. Let's see, was there a person? Okay, Councilmember Eagles.
Actually, I was thinking Councilmember Narda Morgan was going to speak on this. Is that correct?
Well, you were speaking, but I guess I'm happy to give a quick, brief description of what we basically. Do you want me to do it, Kate?
Please, yeah, I'd rather you do it. Thank you.
I thought you were doing, so I'm not really prepared, but our committee met with Nick Brown of the Glen Ellen Forum. Jed and I met. Kate has something going on, but he really gave us an incredible update of what the forum had been up to and the results. The first thing they did, they started in 2017, and they got the results from a survey that was helped put together by the forum. And it was concerned, most of the people in Glen Ellen were really concerned with the amount of traffic, with speeding, with bike paths, with sidewalks, and with lighting, as you can imagine. So they assembled all this criteria, and then they met with the sheriff and the CHP officers. They were very helpful, and they encouraged them to, and this was interesting, I think, to me, that they encouraged the Traffic and Safety Committee to meet with the Sonoma County engineers, which I think is something we will probably take up in our next platform that we do with this. And the Santa Rosa engineers suggested that they, one of the most reasonable projects was to look at sidewalks. And so they were looking at fixing the sidewalks, and they were actually doing a project on Arnold Drive near Warm Springs. And the Traffic and Safety Committee asked if they could maybe engineer the sidewalks in front of the Poppy building, but it turned out that that was too big of a project. So then they asked about, let's do speed bumps, but the fire department did not want speed bumps because it really, it interfered with traffic and, their ability to get places quickly. So they went back and did some more studies, and they surveyed the community again, and they sat at intersections, they counted cars and pedestrians, and they actually bought a LiDAR, which is a type of radar gun, and they tested speeds. And they actually came to the conclusion that generally there was not an overwhelming problem with speed, except for a few spots in town, one of which was Warm Springs Road. And they felt it was kind of more of a perception because the town is so narrow in spots, and that it created kind of a bottleneck, but it was more of a perception than actual problem with speed. And so they looked again, and the top concerns that came up again were lighting, bike paths, and sidewalks. And I asked Nick to comment on all the signs that we all see around Love Our Town, Slow Down. And he told us that the signs were the first response to the town's concern over speeding. And they were printed up and distributed at meetings and the town fair and other venues. and they were extremely popular. And as you know, they now pepper all parts of the town. You see them everywhere. But what was interesting about that particular project is that the Springs loved the idea of these signs, and they kind of followed signs for their town. And then I believe Sonoma County took up the idea with, you see the black and white signs on the road that now say, slow down Sonoma, WTF, slow down Sonoma. They also consulted with Boys Hot Springs where their sidewalks were installed. And as you know that, and I think Susan can attest to this, it made a very big difference in their community. And it was a great improvement on just the feeling of that town as a community being very connected. The next step the committee considered was buying a trailer. And you've probably seen this when you've been driving down the highway. It has a large pole attached and it tracks cars and speed limits. And they were going to find various places to park it on private property, because I guess they couldn't park it on public property. They were going to move it around the town and see exactly how fast people were going. But then the fires came and everything kind of exploded and abandoned. And when the forum returned after the fires, the Traffic and Safety Committee was transformed into, ta-da, the Emergency Response and Ready Glen Ellen. So there has not been a traffic committee since, but we did learn a lot from our meeting with Nick, and we're going to take a lot of these into consideration. I think maybe one of the first things we'll do is possibly a survey, and we'll take it from there. So that's what we learned in our meeting with Nick Brown and Glen Ellen Forum, Traffic and Safety.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Morgan. And let's see, any questions or comments on any of the ad hoc committee reports? Any public comments or questions?
Question.
Yeah.
You
Councilman-
want to comment regarding from the SDC ad hoc committee?
Oh, yes. If they're ready to.
So I'll give you a brief one because in deference to time. Last week, there was a meeting on the SDC campus. It was attended by the multitudes of PAT members, 2 members from Permit Sonoma, including Tennis Wick, who is the director of Permit Sonoma, and the planner for the SDC project, at least as it stands, a member of the state General Service Administration, and 3 members of the part-time General Services Administration staff members. They went mostly through the buildings that have the potential for reuse. And I will go into more detail of that next time because it's kind of interesting and there's a lot of detail to it.
All right. Thank you, council member. And any other ad hocs that were forgotten or organizations? And last chance for public comment.
Not seeing anybody.
Okay, so consideration of items for future agenda. And I'm just gonna, just a reminder that it sounds like the Permit Sonoma presentation would be a really good one for the next month or two. So, and other ideas for future agendas?
Likely to be discussed will be the financial outlays prior to the end of the fiscal year.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. I have a quick question about that for Ariel and or Susan. So it's let's say if one of the ad hocs wanted to hold a public meeting and rent a building, let's just say down the road, August, could that money be allocated from this year's pot?
No, so that would be in the new fiscal year. If you already have, I know this is not the case, but if you already knew that you are doing that you are planning it and it is in August, I mean, that would be more debatable, but And I don't know that you would, I would kind of discourage people from renting buildings. I know for the neighborhood captains, we were able to use the Kenwood Depot for free because it was a community, you know. So this community tends to have free spaces, and we don't like to, even as the supervisor's office, we don't like to pay for buildings when you can get them for free, just in general. But generally it should be things that are things you could spend them on before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. Any other thoughts on future agendas? Let's see, we have the Sonoma Valley Sanitation Hazard Mitigation Plan update, which I can't remember exactly what that's going to cover. But is that actually being planned for May already, or is that just a possibility?
I already did set it for May. We can always move it, but it is the same sort of the same presentation that Councilmember Dickey got at SPCAC. The value of them doing it here, I think it would be a slightly shorter presentation, is because that is right smack dab in the middle of their public comment process, because it is out for public comment right now. So that was kind of the idea, was to get it in front of all of your eyes, as well as the, you know, the community that might come to this, as well as, you know, the Kenwood press that might write about it, right? To just get the word out that the community can comment.
Okay. Would anyone object to if we have that sanitation hazard mitigation plan update next month, and then we shoot for June for the Permit Sonoma presentation? Anybody have any thoughts or objections? Or yeah, Councilmember Newhouser.
Well, some of the things that were requested by the public earlier, I just wanted to make sure that that was incorporated into future agenda item requests. And also it may be useful to have a presentation and a discussion about the design guidelines and how it applies to our mandate prior to having the PRMD presentation, because then we'll be prepared with questions for that presentation. And the only other thing was the briefing, and I guess this could be included by PRMD too, would be the briefing on the development, the specific development plans that have been put forward in any zoning changes. So I think it's just it's a matter of more of a matter of being specific about what we want the presentation on, and maybe a previous briefing on the guidelines, on the Glen Ellen guidelines.
It sounds like a number of balls to juggle. And part of it's the timing on these things. Anybody have any thoughts on how we should?
I think we probably could make it inclusive. It'll be a long meeting, but I mean, they're going to be familiar with the design guidelines. They'll be able to advise us on the transparency issue related to projects that are being proposed and how they're administered and approved. So it seems to me that it's a pretty, it would be a pretty comprehensive meeting, agreed, but it probably could cover everything.
Yeah, I'd be willing to sit through a longer meeting for that. Yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
So just to clarify from what Councilmember Dickey just said, so yeah, I feel some urgency around having the Permit Sonoma on because of what we heard earlier, but I understand the timing that, as Ariel just mentioned, for the sanitation. Are you both suggesting we would do both, or are you suggesting more that the Permit Sonoma will be a longer, more comprehensive presentation? I'm not sure. But are you suggesting both of those occur in May, or not necessarily?
No, I would not.
Okay. You would not, yeah. I just feel like June is late somehow with that urgency, but maybe maybe that's not the case. I don't know. Any other thoughts on that? I don't know why I feel that way. I guess it was the urgency expressed by public comment.
I mean, my own input would be, I think we should prioritize the Permit Sonoma presentation. I mean, if you want more information about the hazard mitigation plan, I can probably provide that, though the public comment aspect of it is important. But it seems like from a community standpoint, the Permit Sonoma presentation probably has a higher priority and certainly a higher level of concern.
Would it be possible, Councilmember Dickey, for you to give us maybe like a 10-minute overview on the hazard mitigation, and just so that if people do want to comment, in a timely manner, they'll have a little more information?
Sure, I could try and do that. Yeah, I can contact them and sort of, we can also localize it so that the impacts are more Glen Ellyn and Kenwood specific, though Kenwood does not even participate in the sanitation district. So it'd be strictly ourselves, really. I'd be happy to do that if that's what you guys want to do.
Another option, I already have them, tentatively, because I had to give them a date. I can let them know that there's another, as long as I can get Permit Sonoma there, right? I'm gonna need to reach out to them like tomorrow because folks are busy. But I can always ask the Sonoma Water folks to keep it to 10 minutes, to do it and to plug the public comment. And something else I wanted them to talk about was Kenwood Water, because even though it's not directly related to the hazard mitigation update, I do know there were issues in 2017 with Kenwood Water, and that there were some improvements made that I want them to explain because I'm not a water scientist, but where that issue won't happen again. And maybe that's something that could happen later as well, not in May. But I could also ask them to do a really quick, just kind of plug the public comment to leave space for the Permit Sonoma.
Question, Ariel, are we talking about the same thing? I mean, the sanitation district did not discuss water. They talked about, sewer capacity. And so.
Yes, that's true. But it's Sonoma Water staff, and they asked me if there was anything else that they would be interested in, but that would make it a longer presentation. So we might be able to kind of split that and just have them highlight the public comment for the hazard mitigation plan and come back later to talk about those other water issues.
So I think I'm hearing that we could hear from the sanitation district with a very short presentation next month, and also have Permit Sonoma come in and talk about those, give us some overview, plus talk about specific planning efforts in Glen Ellyn. Does that seem like that would work to have all those happen next month? I mean, I agree with Councilmember Eagles that it does feel urgent to hear from Permit Sonoma as soon as possible. Or would anybody object to trying to do all that in one meeting?
I have no objection. I mean, I think the Permit Sonoma should be prioritized.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, Councilmember Morgan.
Yeah, I agree that it should definitely be on the, the high priority Permit Sonoma, but I am wondering, because it is such a kind of a big issue with the community, it might take up quite a bit of time. So I just might want to be ready for that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Councilmember Cooper.
I just want to agree with Councilman Morgan. Something that affects the entire area, like the permit process. I think we want to have all the time we could get with that. That'd be my vote.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I quite got that. Councilmember Cooper.
I would vote for maximizing all the time we can for Sonoma County. Clogging it up.
Okay, it sounds like we've got a pretty good consensus. I mean, one thing I might suggest is we could forego the ad hoc reports for 1 month, just to give ourselves a little extra time.
Great idea. Yeah.
Okay, well, Ariel and Damon and I will sit down the next week or two and set up our agenda, but we'll, I think we have pretty good guidance here, so it shouldn't be too hard. And I don't think, Ariel, we don't take public comments at this point. Is that correct?
You can. Technically, a public comment is allowed on every agenda item.
Okay. Well, sure. I'll open it up just because since I mentioned it, I don't want anybody to feel shut out. Any public comments on next month's agenda?
I'm not seeing anyone raise their hands.
Okay. All right. So I think we are finished, and unless anybody has any last comments or ideas. Okay, well, I'm going to call this meeting to a close at 7:57 p.m. And thanks everybody for coming. Thanks to the public who showed up as well. And thanks for all the work and effort of council members and Supervisor Gorin. And get ready for next month. It'll be a big one.
All right.
Thank you, Arthur.
Thanks.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.